Hello everybody, welcome back to Ableton Live. I've had multiple requests in my Discord to make a sort of how-to kind of tutorial thing about how I make my songs. This is sort of going to be a video on what exactly makes up the quote-unquote max velocity sound. And I'm just going to go over the four basic components, at least I think there's four, that make up what I do with my music and how I make it sound like what it is. So yeah, hope you enjoy. First part we're going to get into here has to do with a bit of instrument selection. Mallets. Mallets are any instruments that you would play with a pair of mallets. Marimbas, xylophones, glockenspiels, like even tubular bells, things like that. I believe, yeah, there's actually a section called mallets in the instrument rack. And pretty much anything from here is how you can sound like me. One of my most used instruments in my songs is African bars. I'm sure you guys will recognize this one. It's that kind of sound. It was used in the Tetris remix down here as a bass. And it's been used for higher melodies in like certain covers of like Stardust. Right? It's in a lot of my songs because I just think it's a really cool sounding instrument. It sort of mixes like a marimba with almost sounds like a square wave. And I think it's really cool. Another one is bright marimba. This bright marimba sound here was actually the original sound from Stardust, like version 1. I wonder if I can recreate it. I think it was something like this. Right? Anything that's played with a mallet is something that I would use. For example, more recently, I believe I used street bells in, I forget exactly what song it was. That's a bit high-pitched. Anything that sounds like this. I think Lo-Fi FM EP appeared in one song. I think it appeared in the background of Interstellar as like a filler instrument. I think I had an auto filter onto it like this, and it, you know, it played something like that. I can't quite remember. But yeah, if you want the max velocity sound, anything that's played with a mallet is definitely a good way to get there. The next part is going to be my two most used effects, which are reverb and an auto filter. So let me bring in the most basic instrument I can think of, which is a piano. Not the world's nicest sounding, not the world's nicest sounding piano, but it can be a nicer sounding piano if you bring these two effects onto it. First of all, auto filter. A filter cuts off certain frequencies of a sound. So normally there's no filter, and you get all the frequencies. But if I lower the filter, you can hear it's cutting off some of that high end. Conversely, you can go the other way, where you can cut off the low end. You can also have a notch to cut out certain frequencies, or a band like this that only allows certain frequencies. And I typically automate these so that it like increases over time. So I might have something like this. Oh, sorry, that's a bit fast. And that's kind of like a fade in that's used in the beginning of a lot of my songs. So we've got this auto filter here, right? And let me drag in another one that's an effect track. Let me drag another one that goes in this direction here. You can hear the piano already sounds a little bit better. It doesn't have that harshness anymore. And next we'll bring in a reverb, my favorite effect. A reverb adds what some people might call an echo. You can hear that? So the low cut and high cut here are if it allows certain frequencies to reverberate. Usually I keep it on the low cut, kind of like this. And I'll increase the decay time to somewhere around like 3 seconds-ish and increase the dry wet, and you get this sound. I don't know what it is about reverb, but I just love it. Like, you can immediately hear how much better this instrument sounds now. Even in higher registers. Or lower registers. Although for that, I'd probably lower this a bit so you can get more full sounds. You hear that? But yeah, auto filter and reverb, they go on pretty much every instrument I use. Usually I don't put reverb on drums, but other than that, they go on pretty much everything I use. Definitely an integral part of my sort of sound. Another thing I want to talk about is downsampling. So I'll talk about two types of downsampling I do, which is filter downsampling that I usually put on drums, and redux downsampling. So let's bring in an instrument here. I'll make like a basic sine wave. I'll just drag my Vital plugin in here, and sine wave. Bit low. Let's just do some of this envelope work. There we go. So this is the most basic sound you can get for a synthesizer, and sometimes I'll go into audio effects here and I'll bring in a redux. And essentially what a redux does, and what I mean by downsampling, is sort of making it sound worse intentionally. So this is your normal sound. And if I increase the downsampling, you can hear. Or there's also the soft mode. And sometimes I'll have a chord or something to like at the end of a song or during a breakdown section, and I'll just increase the downsample. Usually in hard mode. And that's something I do quite often. Sometimes I'll just leave it on a barely noticeable downsample, something like 4. You can hear there's some like extra harmonics that it brings in. And this can sound really good if I were to bring in some of those effects from before. If I drag an auto filter in here, and actually, you know what, the default setting on it will probably be fine. And a reverb, put it on low cut, get rid of the high cut, increase the dry wet, put the decay time up. It sounds nice. Something about it sounds very spacey, and spacey is a good way to describe a lot of my music. The other type of downsampling I do is filter downsampling, and I typically do that with drums. So let's take this 212 kit. This is the one I used in Cool Mist V2. There we go. This is the one I used in Cool Mist V2. Not that one I didn't. This one. Right? Very loud, very harsh, very aggressive. But what I did was I grabbed a filter in here and I lowered it quite a bit, and I essentially made it sound bad on purpose. Right? I think I also had another auto filter to make the kick a bit less punchy. I put it in the other direction here. Like, there we go. And I think I decreased the sound of this clap and of this snare. Right? And that's what I mean by downsampling. It sounds worse, arguably. There's less frequencies, it sounds like a lower quality sample. But for songs that I make, and especially like ambient ones like Cool Mist V2, it really works well, I think. That's a little bit at a time, honestly, but it's hard to, I'm playing on my computer keyboard right now. But yeah, and that's something that I'll do to a lot of drum samples. Finally, is the kind of bass I use. Is I tend to use mainly sub bass. So a sub bass is, and I usually use Brainstormer for it for whatever reason, I'm not sure why, but a sub bass is essentially just a really low pitched sine wave. So I'll change the oscillator to a sine wave, and I'll lower my octave to like C0, and you'll have this. Usually I'll limit the voices to 1, and I'll stick some portamento onto it, which is glide. And that is the low end of my bass. Sometimes I'll put a filter onto it. You can hear that? Usually plays in the background of songs, like you know, something like that. And that's typically the kind of bass I use. You'll see a lot of producers, they use like other types of synth bass sounds, like an acid bass, for example. Let me see if I can find one. Here, this Wonder bass is a good example. Something that's like a saw wave that's really gritty, you know? Right? But I don't like to do that. I'm not sure why. In some cases it can sound really, really good, but with the kind of music I make, it just doesn't sound that great. Now, occasionally I will drag in a bass guitar, and this is my it's pretty okay plug-in for a bass guitar. And usually I won't let all of those frequencies in. Usually I'll throw an auto filter onto this, cut off the high end, and just keep most of the bass. Usually I'll actually do a mix of the two, so I'll have a sub bass and a real bass. Usually the real bass is playing some higher type bass notes, like something up here, and the sub bass is playing something really low down. And together that's usually the bass line for my songs. But yeah, that's pretty much the main core elements. Of course, everything varies from song to song, and I didn't include anything about production in this video, or like sample selection or arranging or anything like that. But if you want to sound like the quote-unquote MaxVilocity sound, the key is those 4 things we talked about. Anything using a mallet, auto filter, reverb combo, downsample the drums a bit, and use a sub bass. And that is sort of the formula I like to stick to when I do most of my originals. Obviously with remixes it'll be a little bit different. Those aren't my songs, they're usually in a different style, so I usually try to match that style somewhat. Unless I'm doing a genre change remix, like the This Is Fine Lo-Fi remix, in which case you can probably hear a lot of those elements. Mallets at the beginning with reverb, a sub bass, filtered drums. Although in that specific remix it was more like a kick and a snap as opposed to a snare, but you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, in general, those are the 4 things I tend to stick to when I make my music. If you guys like this video, I might go into more in depth about things like sample selection and arranging and that kind of stuff, and how I actually put together a song. But this is just about the sound and style I go for in general. This video was a request from my Discord server. There's a link in the description if you'd like to join that. We're not a very big community, but I like to think that we're quite an open and welcoming community, and it'd be nice if you could pop by if you're interested. If not, of course, that's okay, no pressure. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.